Okay, so first of all, thank you to Jeremy and the team behind Creative Mornings for inviting us to share with you today. My name is Chen Yi, this is Timothy. We're part of a larger design group called Sibling. We established ourselves as an architectural practice not long ago in 2012. So as an architectural practice, we're interested in the organisation of space, whether that be a building, an event, an installation, or an urban strategy. Our relationship together extends way beyond just a working one, that being because we all studied together in university in the early 2000s. Despite our short history as an architectural practice, we don't see ourselves as new, fresh, or emerging. The reason for this is that we've been left with the rich heritage of architecture. This extends back thousands of years. Its Western canon of knowledge can be traced back to Roman architect Vitruvius, who published a book on architecture. Now, we don't want to stand in front of you with a 2,000-year-long lesson on architecture. Instead, we want to show you our work and show how it draws upon this rich cultural practice, and how it's this cultural practice over time that makes Sibling who we are. And we don't want to forget this, even if it is pre-Google.
So let's fast forward back from, I guess, 15 BC to 2013 in midwinter, and Sibling were invited by the University of Melbourne to participate in the alumni series. So that means they asked all the big names before, like DCM, Lyons, Peter Elliott, 6 Degrees, and there was only one problem, because every time everyone had an alumni show, a retrospective, they had 2 decades of work to show, but we only had 1 year together as a practice. We're like, shit, what do we do? And we're like, we need some heritage, we need to have a bit of our history. And we thought, well, with architecture, there is this discourse that extends a long period of time, so we can really draw upon that to kind of use a retrospective to actually reflect on current issues. So one idea that really stuck with Sibling was the idea of disconnection. It's a really important idea to us. How do you disconnect in the space today, in this world? And so we decided instead to explore this idea. So this idea of on and off. And I guess this comes back to the idea of the Internet of Things to us. So in 2009, Wired magazine said that there are more objects talking to other objects in the world than objects to subjects, so objects to human beings. So for example, you wake up and your coffee pot talks to your alarm clock, and your motion sensor talks to your thermostat. So all these objects in the world are talking to each other, and in 2009 this was a critical mass. So from this idea we started to think, if we all stand connected, if we all stand and bump, check and like, what would be the alternative to this? So we became interested in the idea of dis, to disconnect, to disengage, and to disassociate. The idea had been around for a while in our office, so an early project of ours was called Apps 101. We're looking at how we could recreate mobile phone apps in the real world, just to test out what we're missing in its translation. So I guess there's a DIY, I guess a real world analog Twitter, Gator, Facebook, banking, etc. But then we started for this exhibition to draw back onto architectural history and look at different ways architects have looked at the idea of disconnection over time to inform our current understanding of it. Kurokawa, may not know him, but if you know the magic cone at Melbourne Central, the big cone, he's the architect that designed that. But in the 1960s, Kurokawa was obsessed with capsules, the idea of the capsule tower. And the capsule itself is a space that disconnects a human being from the outside world, but also gives them the mobility which they can travel around the city as well. Another architect, Buckminster Fuller and Sadao. It's not Under the Dome if you've watched that HBO show. It's an idea from the 1960s. This is Manhattan. So it's a 3-kilometre dome that would cover about 50 blocks of Manhattan, and 16 Apache helicopters would lift it up and drop it onto Manhattan. And the idea that, once again, disconnection from the outside world. Another more recent project is the Secret Service building on the Thames in London. And pretty ugly building, I think. Actually, it stars in a James Bond film, and whenever you see it in a James Bond film, it gets blown up, and you hear a lot of architects will kind of cheer in the audience as well. But the way that the building works is it operates like a Faraday cage. And a Faraday cage, which is something we became quite obsessed with back in science, is actually a cage itself that can stop electromagnetic waves from entering. So electromagnetic frequency waves, think of radar, Wi-Fi, so your smartphones wouldn't work with inside that cage at all. So this is what we became quite intrigued with through our search through history. And then we started to look at other examples of the Faraday cage, and I guess maybe you may know the booster bag. If you put foil inside your backpack, you can shoplift. So it's the same kind of precedent as well.
So back to the exhibition, with all these historical precedents in mind, we knew we had the technology that we needed to create this off space, the Faraday cage. But we wondered, what would the on space look like? This is where we looked to the ultimate organising principle, the grid. We were mainly interested in the grid as defined by Super Studio. So they were a group of collaborative architects that had quite radical ideas. They formed together in the 1960s from Florence. They created these fantastic images of negative utopias with these kind of expansive, endless grids. I guess they were a critique on, the potential of an uncritical contemporary urban culture. We also used the grid as a structuring design device that allowed us to organise everything within the space. So you'll see here this steel frame, red steel frame with like a grid of mirrors that contains the off space, the Faraday cage inside, and the on space around the perimeter of the exhibition is like a gridded tile of walls that also holds the exhibits of all these historical precedents that we'd been researching. Along with the rest of the exhibition, we produced a publication and a short film that further explored these ideas. So the exhibition lasted for a few weeks, and in that time we also held events within the Faraday cage that encouraged, I guess, social interaction. We had a dinner party with no mobile phones. Instead of Friday night drinks, we had Friday night winks, which was more of a meditative come down to the end of your week. Yeah, so it was a lot of fun.
So with Sibling, we're not only obsessed with architectural history, the heritage of our discourse, but also how heritage is a way of practicing, a cultural practice. So a lot of the ideas that we get out in the world from architectural discourse then becomes of our own internal logic as a designer as well, that moment of serendipity when you start to do things. So our latest project, which we were commissioned at the same time as On-Off, so a lot of the ideas you'll see will come through it, and it's a publishing and retail concept brand that will open in 2 weeks or 3 weeks in Melbourne. And this idea of on and off continues or travels within the project, and also this idea of the grid as a structuring device as well. So just a quick sneak preview, the idea of the on space, kind of the white space on the plan there. So there'll be print-on-demand apparel, LED and mirrors that kind of go on to infinity. But if you go into the off space as well, which is the VIP kind of customer lounge, you'll see that it's very dark, black on black materials, which kind of created a nice effect. Quiet sound, no sound, I should say. And the idea, a lot of the ideas that come through from the last project are starting to filter through to this one as well.
So this next project I'm going to show you is in its really early development stages. It's in Sydney and it's called Twin Peaks. Yes, we've borrowed the name from one of our favourite TV series, but I guess it's referring to its form, its architectural form, which responds to the historical context of the project. So what's special about this site? It's in the inner city suburb of Glebe in Sydney. What exists there currently is this workers' cottage, so still weatherboard cottage, and at the rear of the site, there's this set of old brick stables, and adjacent to it's also this reserve, which is a rarity now in the inner city. Another awesome condition of the site is all these neighbours looking onto the site over at the park. So we have to be really careful in how we deal with our proposal on the site, because we don't want to block their views, of course. So our response has been to, of course, maintain as much of the historical context of the site. I guess I forgot to mention that this particular plot of land is one of the last few that still have an old brick stable in that area of Glebe. So it's a reminder of the working class neighbourhood it used to be. So yeah, with all these conditions, as well as fulfilling the client's brief to have 2 new townhouses for contemporary living, and also all the usual regulatory concerns from the council, we came up with putting in 2 new forms onto the site that, I guess, inserting new forms into the old existing cottage and stables at the rear. The 2 forms, I guess they come down into this valley, which is like a shared open space courtyard, which also opens out onto this park in the front. We've punched through voids to allow for access to light, and also private outdoor areas, but also to kind of reveal the old bones of the existing cottage and the brick stables. Another layer of operable screens is put around the outside for the users to operate the level of privacy they want to engage with from the park. And this is, I guess, looking around the neighbourhood, you see a lot of Victorian homes, Victorian era homes that have been retrofitted with these 1950s, 1960s steel gates and doors. One company's named them after different historic periods, so I don't think it's that clear on this slide, but one's called Federation, one's called Art Deco. We've even got an Aztec design, and there's also a really general one called Heritage if you weren't sure what era you were fond of. So I guess, yeah, we're going to draw upon these kinds of ideas for the operable screen idea. So yeah, we're really excited to present this to you because it's the first time we've actually shown it to anybody. So you see in this image, we've got the new form sitting within or nestled within the old brick stable walls.
Yeah, so I guess to summarise, we're not making any grand narrative about heritage, but to us we are interested in I guess heritage has been a way of being a cultural practice that travels through your profession, your discipline, and for architects that travels back very far. And it's not only just, you know, this architectural discourse that we carry forward, but also, I guess, within our internal practice ourselves as we grow and develop with each other, with other siblings, and also, I guess, as you see with the last project as well, also through, you know, looking to, I guess, references in the city as well. So that's it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, we have plenty of time for some questions. I guess just to start off with, I'll hand this back to you, but could you tell us a bit more about the structure of Sibling and how, I guess, how everyone kind of works together with 8 or more people, and then we'll just open it up.
Okay, with Sibling, there's 8 of us as founding partners. There's 4 of us in the room at the moment, and it's usually hard to get 8 of us in the room at the same time. We all studied, well, most of us studied together at university. We all studied at the University of Melbourne, and most of us shared a studio together in Mitchell House, on the corner of Elizabeth and Lonsdale Street. And so we got used to each other's working habits. So, you know, if you're sharing a studio at the moment, look at the people around you. These are the kind of people that you want to work with for the next 5-10 years. For us, it was. And so once graduating, we all went our separate pathways, so all around the world to work for different architecture firms. And I guess coming back to Melbourne, after working for other big offices, we realised we really wanted to work for ourselves and with each other. And we thought that was really important too. With the structure or organisation, so there's 4 full-time partners, and then everyone else kind of revolves around that. With disciplines, we've all studied architecture, landscape architecture, property construction, graphic design, cultural studies and economics. So we kind of draw upon, you know, a broad spectrum as well.
That's between us, not each of us studying.
Yeah, so I mean, all of us studied architecture, but then different people did other courses along the way as well. Yeah.
Other questions? Just a really specific one. How many people would live in a townhouse?
So there's 2 townhouses on site, and I guess the area is kind of like Fitzroy, so quite dense inner city living. So this is the front, the front form, and then at the back. So it's like for a growing family. So there's 3 bedrooms in each, but each house is about 150 square meters, which I guess a suburban home would be about 250. So it's kind of a typical, single fronted terrace here.
What are they doing with the
With the
cottage in front?
Oh, the front cottage remains. Yeah, so there's like an attachment at the back. Yeah. It's actually conditioned to maintain as much of the cottage as possible. Yeah, it's this funny thing where it's not a heritage listed building, but it's in a conservation area, so it adds to the character. Yeah.
How do the screens move on the windows?
We're hoping so. I mean, like as I said, it's early development stages, and of course our dream would be to have them all operable and openable, but that's quite a high budget to do that well. So.
I've read about your Young Street project in Fitzroy, and I found it really interesting in having, inhabiting it and using it as a gallery, etc. And I guess it was leading on to like a multi-res development. What was the evolution, or the beginning and also the evolution of that project?
That project, the client we had with that, unfortunately, he, for financial reasons or whatever, couldn't go on with it. But he sold it to another client, and who's taken forward the design. But no, we're not. No. But a lot of the ideas from that project have fed through into a lot of our other housing projects. So this idea of all the screens on that facade were openable as well, and about engaging with the public and allowing the private all the people within to kind of mediate how much they wanted to engage with the street. That's kind of following through into this project here. So yeah, I mean, unfortunately the nature of architecture, it's such a long and slow and difficult process that, I mean, to get a project off the ground is a really big achievement, so.
I guess that's why we find we're involved with a lot of exhibition work, because we can really quickly flesh out ideas that we could in a housing project that will take 2 years, you know, to come into realisation. So we find a lot of the exhibitions give us this opportunity to do lots of details or explore lots of ideas in an experimental way.
Can you tell us a bit more about like events that you do? I know that you've been involved in a few events in the past.
Yeah, I mean, often with the things that we do, especially with exhibitions, we will do events to kind of test out the idea. So one project we did was called Public Offer, which was the first exhibition at the Design Hub at RMIT, which was looking at independent publishing magazines from the 1960s in Melbourne, but then international architecture DIY magazines from the 2000s. So I curated that with Kate Rhodes, and Sibling, we did the exhibition design. And through that, we did a lot of events. So we had within the exhibition hall, there was 2 netball rings, which then formed a badminton court. And then Tin and Ed, who are our studio mates, then did a badminton game. And the idea was to talk to younger graphic designers over a game of badminton. What else was there? There was lots of talks in that space. So there was tier seating that would spin around and then form a stadium. So I think the Thousands at the time did a conference, a one-day-long symposium for writers and bloggers about writing for magazines. So yeah, we like to test out the space with what we do as well. And I guess with the exhibition on-off, we did lots of events as well to test out the reality of the space that we're creating, because architecture is nothing without people inside it. So yeah.
Sorry, there you go. With the open house this weekend, where would you like to see the site that you have in, or one that you recommend?
I think for me it's an obvious one, but I haven't been inside the power station yet, so that's one I really want to go into, because it's such an otherworldly space. And also, I haven't checked, but I think Newman College as well, but there's only shortlists for that, so I didn't get on the shortlist.
For me, I'm being a little bit lazy, and I've just identified a few houses in the North Fitzroy area where I live that I want to go check out, and because I'm working on a lot of the housing projects in the office at the moment, so I want to steal some of the detail ideas. And
I had one about speaking with clients, about when you put a conceptual idea forward, how do your clients take up the ideas of your heritage and based design? Can you talk about that with them?
I mean, we really wanted to push the heritage. I guess some people see it as a downer. It's like, oh, we can't knock over the cottage, or we can't demolish the stables and just start from new. But we couldn't go forward with the project without embracing that. So instead of making it like a negative, you kind of say, well, look, this cottage and the old brick stables are just going to add value to this development. So, but I don't know, I think with any kind of restriction, I don't know, we shouldn't see heritage as a restriction, especially for this project. You can turn it into something valuable for it, yeah.
If you had to give a piece of advice to graduating architects, what would it be?
I guess the first piece of advice I'd give would be to question everything that an older architect would tell you. If the architecture profession is going to move forward, you really need to challenge what is the current standard in the industry, and to get as much broad experience as possible, both here and abroad as well.
One more question, anyone?
How are you perceived in the industry? Are you challenged? Are you well received?
I'd say we're welcomed.
Yeah, I think the architecture profession in Melbourne is very friendly, and Sydney as well, I find. So we're very welcomed. Sometimes, like I'll speak quite openly, like sometimes, because a lot of our work is smaller, they're not exactly buildings at the moment because we're building up our capability to get to that. People often say you do interior architecture or you're interior designers or you're doing exhibition design, but as Chinyi defined at the beginning, you know, architecture to us is an organisation of space, and most people in the profession get that as well. So I think we're quite well received at the moment.
And last question, just over here.
Yeah, what digital tools do you use and how do you feel that that influences the outcome of what you do?
Yeah, well, I mean, we use like 3D modelling and render programs, like standard ones like anyone else. I don't think there's anything that special. You know, we're not grasshoppering the facade or anything at the moment. But, you know, I don't like the opposition between digital and analog. I think there's the same way of thinking in a way. So I think we slip between both. I mean, there's a lot of model making, physical model making that we do in the studio. That's really important to understanding how things spatialize. So we find that analog method really helpful for us, but also just as, you know, just a 3D render on the computer is just as efficient to explain to a client at the same time as well. So I guess everything that we do is three-dimensional, so it's easy to communicate to a client in 3 dimensions than it is in 2-dimensional plans or sections, for example.